So a masterclass in savings brought to you by Atlantic Financial. We're going to go through 10 money saving steps that you can take when it comes to student loans. And there's a lot of information, so I'm probably going to look at my notes at one point or another, just a heads up, because there's a lot of data here that I need to cover, okay? So when we talk about student loans, we need to talk about sort of generally the situation revolving student loans as a nation in the United States. So, you know, student loans rank number 2 in overall debt in the United States. So the largest debt in the United States that everybody carries is a mortgage. Over $13 trillion amongst Americans is owed in mortgage dollars. And the second runner-up is student loans at over $1.2 trillion, followed in close third by credit card debt. But that's just an interesting statistic that every credit card dollar owed in the United States still doesn't total the amount of student loan debt that exists. So when we break that down, over 40 million Americans have student loans outstanding. 5.9 million Americans, about 14% of student loan holders, owe more than $50,000. So today we had 33% of folks say that they owed over $50,000. About 14% of all student loan holders owe more than $50,000.
And I think part of that is that when you're in the East Coast or West Coast where colleges are more expensive, you're going to find a higher number of people with that over $50,000 amount due.
I think it's also got something to do with the fact that you're here today, that you're looking for resources when it comes to student loans. You know, the more student loan dollars you have, the more likely, you know, you're gonna need to look for resources when it comes to paying for those. So let's talk about, you know, that the top of this page says student loan crisis, and it really is, and that's evident in the bipartisan response to student loans. So AOC has been saying that, you know, the student loan crisis means that her entire generation is delaying or foregoing purchasing homes because they just can't afford it. Tucker Carlson has been quoted as saying that Congress must address the student loan debt problem and stop colleges from scamming our kids. You know, the cost of education is ever increasing, and the amount of student loans is also. So let's talk about option number 1. Behind door number 1, we have forbearance. So forbearance is something that you guys have all probably heard of. You know, it's this where you don't have to make a payment, but interest still accrues. So you still have to make, your interest is still accruing, you're still being charged interest on your loan, that interest is still compounding, and it's discretionary. The lender does not have to give you a forbearance. You could potentially qualify for forbearance if you're having a financial struggle, if you had a job change, or if you have increase in medical costs. Now, a mandatory forbearance is typically granted for medical internship, residencies. If you're in the National Guard and you're activated, you can potentially qualify for a mandatory forbearance. Or if the amount of your payments is more than 20% of your gross monthly income. Forbearance can last for up to 12 months at a time, and it can only amount to 3 years total. So you can't surpass 3 years in forbearance. At the end of the forbearance, you still owe every dollar. In fact, you owe more dollars because you've accrued interest over that time. Typically in a forbearance situation, you can elect to make interest payments if you choose, but you're not obligated to. If you're capable of making interest-only payments, it's recommended that you do that, because if you don't, then you're going to pay interest on the interest. And unfortunately, forbearance options do not necessarily apply to private loans. Most private lenders will follow the forbearance procedure around while in school and for the 6 months following school, but they're not obligated to as a private lender. Brian, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I think that's all accurate, but I know we'll talk about this more later, but there are things you can do with private loans as well, and we'll get into those later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second option would be deferment. Now, a deferment is the same, it has the same effect on the payment, meaning you do not pay, but you also don't accrue interest. Deferments are what you qualify for when you're enrolled in school in a federal program. So while you're enrolled at least half time, you aren't making payments. And for 6 months following that, you are also not making payments. So that's a little bit of information here, which was pulled from studentaid.ed.gov, that your loans, as well as a parent who is getting Direct Plus or an FFEL Plus loan, which is the loans that parents co-sign with their children, can also qualify for deferment while the child is enrolled at least half time at an eligible college or career school, and for 6 months after that half time ends. So typically 6 months after graduation. So what happens when we're outside of our deferment options, or we're not forbearing anymore? We get into repayment options. And the federal government has about 3 programs that are available for relief type repayment. First one being income-based repayment. One of 3 federal loan relief programs that matches your income, your payment to your monthly income. In general, it's about 10 to 15% of your take-home pay that is going to be dedicated to an IBR, or an income-based repayment. Now, you do have to qualify for income-based repayment based on some type of financial hardship. The next option, which does not require a financial hardship, is what's called an income. These are all acronyms, and they're all got the word income, and they're all very complicated. So there are a lot of options, and they like to make it as confusing as possible. So let's talk about option number 2 as far as income repayment, which is income-contingent repayment. Now, this does not require a financial hardship, but it only reduces your payment to 20% of your take-home income. Now, that's contradictory to the previous program, which was 10 to 15%, but there's not the financial hardship requirement. Now, this does not stop your payment amount from increasing as your income increases. So if you're in an income contingent repayment program, you have to re-qualify every certain amount of months, which means you have to resubmit your income. And as your income goes up, your payment amount will go up. And then the last federal repayment program is pay as you earn. Now, this does have eligibility requirements, and you have to contact the federal government, the federal student loan provider, to understand those more clearly, but it reduces your payment to the lowest amount, which is only 10% of your income. And then after 20 years of payments, the remaining balance is forgiven. Now, this payment option also has income increases. So as your income increases, the payment amount would also increase. And there are different qualifications in order to receive this repayment option. Now, Brian, I don't think you and I said this in the beginning. However, all of the information that we talk about today is going to come out in an email after class. So I'm going through these rather quickly, but keep in mind that you are going to get all this information, as well as some additional resources, which we'll talk about, okay? So the next option, other than just straight repaying the loans that you have, would be a federal direct consolidation loan. Put in the comment box if you have graduated from school and you're now in the repayment period of your loans. Have any of you taken advantage of the federal direct consolidation loan program? Now, this consolidate all of your federal loans into one payment. It doesn't change the terms of your loans. It just consolidates them down into one. It can potentially, if you have a defaulted or late student loan payment, turn that loan current through the consolidation, and everybody can apply through studentloans.gov. I see a couple people saying yes here, that they have taken advantage of the program.
That's right.
I encourage anyone who hasn't taken a look at this program to seriously consider it, because it is extremely beneficial, and you're still protected under the federal guide, under the other federal repayment programs we just discussed. So by taking advantage of the direct consolidation, you can still be protected by the federal programs.
And a couple things, again, to the person who just asked, just go right to that website, studentloans.gov, and it'll be on the resource sheet you get. But the other thing is, regardless of your situation, this is a great thing to consider because it also simplifies your finances. So you're making one payment instead of 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how many different student loans you have. And I always find one payment is better than 4. So just in making sure you don't wind up being late, or and usually when you put 4 loans into one, you're automatically going to wind up with a lower payment, just because of the compounding and the combination of those loans. So it is something to look at. Again, studentloans.gov is where you go to start that process.
Yes, and what Brian just said, on top of that, in addition, you don't have to, there's no hardship requirement. Everybody can consolidate their loans through the direct consolidation program. So definitely take a look at that. Okay, so what's another option for refinancing? You can actually refinance your loan. So that was the direct consolidation loan. This is actually a refinance. So this is actually where you would get a private loan to pay off your federal loans. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, why would I want to do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. You have control of your own destiny, which means you get to determine your repayment plan, your interest rate. However, you do lose the protections of the federal program. Now, this is really for the folks who are not having a hard time paying the loan payments that they have and are looking to try and pay it off potentially faster. You have to qualify based on your credit. We're going to talk a little bit about those steps here. So you need to determine how much debt you need to refinance, so the total amount of your loans, the current balance and APR, the interest rate for those loans. You need to look around at different lenders and see what options they have available. You don't want to go off and apply to them. We're going to talk a little bit about why you wouldn't want to do that here in a minute. You want to apply for the loan that you want, and then you want to authorize the lender to pull your credit and take the application. Next option, student loan forgiveness. Now, there are a couple student loan forgiveness programs that exist. We're going to talk about one specifically, which is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. For short, it provides a path for federal student loan forgiveness if you work in a qualified public service profession. That can include medical, it can include working for government agencies. If you go down this path, you have to meet certain requirements. It's only for certain degree programs, certain fields of education. I know a couple of attorneys who have taken advantage of the program. You do have to make payments for 10 years on the interest, and then after that 10-year program, after that 10 years is over, the balance is forgiven. Now, some of the negatives to that might be it's not guaranteed, which means at any time during that decade, if the program were to run out of money or were to be repealed by the federal government, you could be left holding the bag. And the qualification process does take a long time.
That's right. And usually, again, like Jimmy said, most of these programs are linked to some sort of public service job. Teachers is another one that they have a forgiveness program for. But you have to teach in a highly needed area in an inner city, usually school system, someplace where the need is great to get the forgiveness. But again, on that website, that's studentloan.gov, you can see what kind of programs are out there compared to what you're doing for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to ask yourself, is it worth the hassle? Do you qualify for more than one program? Because you also want to consider, okay, if this program runs out of money, then I have a backup program to go back to. And does your profession qualify? Those are all questions you need to ask yourself before you start thinking about student loan forgiveness. So, we're going to talk about getting help fast. Many borrowers qualify for help, but they don't know that they exist and they just don't apply. You may qualify for an income-based repayment option or one of the other options that we talked about today, and just not know that you qualify for it. So that's the purpose of this course, is to educate you about the options that exist. Outreach is incomplete or inconsistent, which means you didn't follow through the process, or you didn't check in with, check in on all the programs. So it might make sense to hire help. You can look, there are organizations that exist. We're going to talk about the one that we offer here at Atlantic Financial, as well as some other resources that you can take advantage of, like a CPA or a tax preparer who specialize in student loans, who can help you through those programs. Now, it's important to be mindful of what you're looking for when you're looking for someone to help you. You want to look for a student loan expert. You want to make sure that they've been doing it for a while. They have online reviews, an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, or potentially get a recommendation from a reputable service provider like your credit union or financial institution, for example. Or potentially sometimes the school you attended may have programs that they can recommend for you. But you need to watch out for fraudsters or student loan scams. So that might be an advance fee scam, which means that they're going to charge you a fee up front. Then they guarantee you some sort of result. If you pay me this fee, I can guarantee you to have your loans paid off in 3 years or get X amount of your loan dollars forgiven. If they're making a guarantee, it's probably too good to be true. And like, Brian and I talk about this during the identity theft class. If something sounds good to be true, it's probably because it is.
That's right. Yeah, and the other one, that consolidation fee scam, there is no fee to do the consolidation loan. You can really do that on your own.
Yeah, and even if you're refinancing your loan, if the lender you're looking to use is charging you an upfront consolidation fee, walk away, find a new lender. You shouldn't be charged a fee to initiate the loan application, to consolidate your loan, to pay them to do that. And then the last one is a law firm scam. There are a lot of fraudulent organizations, quote unquote, law firms who say that they will settle your debt for pennies on the dollar, that you need to pay them a retainer fee, and that you need to start paying them your student loan payments and stop paying your lenders. And sometimes there's one of two situations that's occurring. One, they're going to stop paying your student loans and wait until your loans go into default and then try to negotiate settlements for you, which can have an extreme detrimental effect on your credit. So it's definitely something to really, really consider if you decided to go that route. But the more alarming situation is that they take your student loan payments and then they just unfortunately disappear. So it's really important that you're doing research with the organizations you're thinking about using before you take advantage of them, because there are scams like this, unfortunately, that do exist. So I said we were going to talk about it, and here's where we're going to talk about it. Private student loans. Only about 6% of all student loan borrowers have private student loans. Private servicers tend to offer the best customer service, but you don't have the same protections that you do under the federal programs. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have any options available. A lot of these lenders have adopted income-based repayment programs very similar to the federal ones. They don't typically offer forgiveness programs. You're going to end up paying for the full balance, but they typically have very flexible repayment options. You can negotiate with private student loan providers a lot more effectively than you can negotiate with federal providers, because the federal providers have 3 or 4 programs that you have to fit into the box to qualify for. A private lender has more freedom to create a program specific to you. Brian and I did a podcast specifically about negotiating with your creditors just this past Wednesday. I encourage you guys, if that's something you're looking to do, whether it's COVID-19 related or not, negotiating with your creditor, that you would check out that podcast. There's a lot of really great information that we talked about in there. Brian, do you have anything you want to add on negotiating?
I think that it's important that you know when you're dealing with a private student loan that you need to have a plan of what you want. I know we say this in some of our other seminars, but you need to know what you can afford to do and what you can't afford to do, and not accept the first thing they offer to you as in a negotiation. We have a whole negotiating your credit seminar and negotiating your debt seminar, and you can't do so much with the federal loans, but with these private loans, you can negotiate, and you should, because you don't want to accept a plan and not be able to live up to it and then be in bigger trouble later.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our next slide, which is, just general advice. And number 2 really should be number 1, because that all comes back to creating a budget. Anytime you're going into any of these conversations, it's important to know what you can afford. Before you decide to go income-contingent repayment or income-based repayment, whichever program you decide to go with, you need to know how much you can afford in your budget. So you need to have a budget first. And you especially need to have your budget before you start talking to your private lenders. Because a lot of that negotiation power comes into, this is what I can afford to pay. What can we do to make your number fit into my number? And having that number in mind of affordability is really important. Brian and I teach a class about budgeting. I'm not sure if you guys have taken it yet. We have one. When do we have one, Brian? You just told me.
Thursday at 12:30.
We have one scheduled for Thursday. It's completely free. You guys can register. It's all about how to get started with budgeting. If you haven't attended that class, it's my favorite, honestly. It's my favorite one to go through, so definitely take a look at that. And how will your credit score be affected? It shouldn't be, unless you're applying to refinance your loan with multiple lenders. We talked about it in home buying. We talked about it in understanding credit. Inquiries do have an impact on your credit, so we don't recommend you just go out and start applying. You do your research, you find the lender and the program that's going to work best for you, and you submit 1, maybe 2 applications for a refinance program. Don't go off and apply anywhere and everywhere. And then the last bit of advice that we're going to give you is never surrender. And we talked about this during the credit seminar. It's never too far gone. It's never over. It's only over when you give up. So don't give up on this. It is a little it is trying. There are resources available, which we're going to talk about. And there are people here available to help you. So don't give up. Keep trying to find the program that's going to work best for you, and make the best of the situation as you can. Brian, do you have anything you want to add here?
I think you covered it very well, Jimmy.
All right, so let's talk about the options that are available. We talked about contacting a CPA or a student loan specialist to help you out, but we have a program called KOFE. Those of you who attended the classes with us before, you've heard a lot about KOFE, and you're going to hear again. KOFE stands for Knowledge of Financial Education. It's free online help tools, as well as virtual and phone financial coaching. We have certified, go ahead.
I don't think we don't stress enough that it is available both in English and Spanish. So if you or a loved one English isn't their first language, it is also available in Spanish, all the resources.
Awesome. I did not know that, Brian. Thank you for sharing. Some of the things that they do, they can do budget, saving strategies. What's not listed here, which is really important, and I don't know why it's not listed here, is they can help you with student loan programs, both private and federal. We have certified credit union financial counselors here at Atlantic Financial. They can help you with your budgeting. They can help you with a lot of things, but they do not specialize in student loans. But this program with KOFE has dedicated representatives who specialize in student loan programs who can help you through those. Their contact information is here. We're going to share that with you guys at the end of this in our follow-up email tomorrow. So I'm not going to leave it up here too long, but we're going to share that information.
The only thing that you need to keep in mind, I know most of you have been on other ones, but you do have to be a member of the credit union to use KOFE. It is free, but if you call there or email them and you are not a member, they're going to refer you back to the credit union to join first.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. So that was a lot of information I just threw at you. You were going to get all this information in a follow-up email. But this is your opportunity to ask questions, anything and everything that you can think of. Share your thoughts, feelings, and emotional outbursts in the chat box. Use the Q&A feature to ask any questions that you might have. We're going to give you just a few moments to go ahead and do that. Feel free to send them whenever you're ready. I'm also just going to put up here mine and Brian's contact information. If you guys have anything you want to talk to us individually about after the seminar, you can feel free to reach out to us there. Also going to be available in the email that we send you.
Any questions at all? Anybody believe that sports will be played again this year? And anything. We'll be glad to talk about anything you like. Well, I guess I want to thank everyone for coming. Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up one more thing. Hold on.
I know what you're going to bring up. Well,
check out mine and Brian's new podcast, AFFCU's Financial Power Podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Brian hates that I bring this up every time, but I really, really am enjoying it, and it's a lot of really great information. What are we talking about next week, Brian?
Next week we're talking about. You know what? I have so many in my head. It's not good.
We're talking about starting off on the right foot after COVID-19.
Oh, that's right.
How to start off on the right foot after COVID-19. We're going to do one about car buying, home buying. There's going to be all kinds of cool things. Subscribe, Spotify, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. And then also on our website under financial guidance, you guys probably found it already because you are in this class, but there is a calendar here that you can email and share with your friends and family, and they can all, or you can all register for the upcoming classes that we have available. Like Brian said, we have budgeting and savings this Thursday, which is a really fun class I love to teach. If you guys have kids or teens, we're going to be talking about money and tech with kids and teens on the 16th. I encourage you guys to check that out, as well as all the other
and tomorrow we're debuting, the same time tomorrow, 6:30, basically dealing with financial stress seminar, as far as, dealing with your financial health and stress.
Absolutely. That's the doc is in. Dr. Brian over there is going to be talking to us about how to deal with our financial stress.
If you do it like me, you'll eat a lot of spaghetti.
We'll be doing budgeting for college students. So that's a